Okay, hello YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about sort of general rules that you needed to follow based kind of on what openings that you play. Now I'm not talking about general principles. General principles are kind of like, attack the center of the board, things of that nature. Those are general principles or rules that we should be following all the time. What I'm talking about are rules that are specific to an opening or a position or a set of positions. So an example would be like, let's say that we have like this Sicilian, and we're playing a very specific variation of the Sicilian. We're playing a Sozin variation, and then they play this queen b6 move. We retreat our knight to b3, they play e6, we play bishop e3, they play queen c7, and we play bishop d3. Okay, so now we have a structure, and we're going to play this structure a particular way. And certain questions are going to come up when we play this structure that are going to have answers that are correct, the majority of the time. So the questions that I'm talking about are some of the most annoying questions in chess. The questions that I'm talking about are like the which rook question. So like once I bring my, once I make maybe another pawn move here, like I play pawn to d4 and I make another queen move, I'm going to castle. I'm either going to castle kingside or queenside, depending on what's in my repertoire and what's in my preparation, and then my rooks are going to get connected. Now, at some point, I'm going to make another rook move. So the question is always like, which rook? Sometimes you have two rooks that can move to the d1 square, and you need to know, okay, which rook do I move to the d1 square? Do I move the a rook? Do I move the f rook? And it's not always so clear, and we don't really have a general principle to tell us which rook to move there. Another question is like, which king safety move should I make? If you play something like f4 and then eventually you castle kingside, at some point you might want to make a king safety move. And of course, it's an open question if should you play king h1 or should you wait and play h3 and king h2. So what are the rules there and what rules apply? So these rules, like what's the correct king safety move and should I make a king safety move at all, and the which rook question, these are questions that are pretty specific to the opening and to the structure. So take this particular opening and this particular structure, for example. Like, let's say we continue, like in this game that was played between Robert Hubner and Victor Korchnoi. Robert Hubner continued with f4. We had Victor Korchnoi continue with rook d8. We had queen f3. We had a6, and we had castles queenside. Okay, so now the general rule here for king safety is at some point white kind of does want to play this move king b1. And in general, when you castle queenside in most openings, if you play king b1, it's not going to necessarily be a bad move like ever. So that's going to be your king safety move. So another example is like, knight b4. Interestingly enough, Hubner actually played g4 in this position. But if you notice over here, the computer gives g4 as an inaccuracy, and the correct move was actually king b1. So we take a look and we see, okay, so this is a general rule for this opening, is we should be playing this safety move, king b1, right after we castle. And you can kind of see why after bishop e7, g4, the computer's giving, of course, a much bigger advantage. So what does it hate about just playing g4 straight away? So g4 straight away, it doesn't like the fact that black can play d5, and then after, say, e5, it's playing knight d3 with check, and then rook d3, and this knight is shuffling into e4, and of course this king is very uncomfortable here still, and the computer still wants you to play king b1. So how is this different? Like, if I play king b1, why can't the computer just play d5 here? And now we notice that white would actually have a major advantage here after e5, and there isn't going to be a knight d3 with check. We can just interpose with e captures f6. So we can kind of establish that in these types of positions, in these types of structures, that king b1 after castles queenside is a critical safety move. So that's a rule that we can lay down for this position. For this type of position, for this type of safety move, that's a general rule and a general principle that we can lay down. Another type of general rule and general principle that we can lay down, like in other Sozin type structures, like let's say we play a Sozin where we castle kingside. So let's say we have a Fischer Sozin. So we're going to have, instead, we're going to have something like a6. We're going to have bishop c4, we're going to have e6, and we can castle kingside right away, or we could play bishop b3. In these knight on b to d7 lines, let's say knight on b to d7, bishop g5, knight c5, f4, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7, or castles kingside are both fine, castles kingside, and then let's say queen c7, and f5. Okay, so here b5 is a super common move. And now we have to ask ourselves, what move should we play? Now I have the engine turned on, so the engine is immediately giving king h1. So king h1 is kind of a critical safety move that we need to play in these types of positions. Actually, if I go back one move and I play a slightly different move, it's an interesting kind of open question on whether or not we should play king h1. But you notice that even after bishop d7, the computer likes king h1. And of course, there was this game, Ivanov versus Noroditsky, that I actually witnessed, where Alexander Ivanov did indeed play king h1. And what was interesting at the time is we were all kind of curious, like, what would have happened if white just started attacking without playing king h1? And it was actually an interesting question. Like, if we play like fe6, fe6, knight f5, things get really entertaining because we have bishop to d3 and then queen g3, and basically the sacrifice knight g7 is in the air. So we're going to have knight b3, and we're going to have knight takes g7. And interestingly enough, the only reason that black not just saves the position, but manages to completely equalize, is because they can play this queen check. So we have this queen c5, king h1, queen e5, threatening to exchange queens. And even though like white certainly isn't lost here, it looks like white at least equalizes in this position. So the computer gives something like bishop f4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop h4 as being this super complicated sort of equal position. But we would have just had an advantage if we'd have played this safety move, if we'd played king h1. So in these positions where we've castled and we've played our move pawn to f4, pawn to f5, it seems like a good general rule in these positions is to play a move like king h1 at some point. Like, this is our safety move that we should play. So one more example of these safety moves and the principles that are behind them would be in, let's say, a d-pawn opening. So let's say we have a double d-pawn opening, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can flip the board here. We're going to go ahead and flip it, and we're going to be taking a look at a double d-pawn opening that I'm going to bring up here just in a second. So instead of this, we're going to have d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7. We're going to have this, h6, b6, bishop d3. So this is interesting general rule that I like to come up with kind of for this position. Like, you play dc4, bishop c4, and then you play bishop b7, and of course your idea here is to equalize with c5 and c captures d4. But at some point you need to find a location for this queen. So what is the general rule here? Where does this queen belong? The queen belongs here. It belongs right where the bishop lives. And it pretty much always belongs there. And it belongs there, so adamantly that you should really try to do it pretty much no matter what. So like after, say, castles kingside and you play c5 and they play queen e2, and you play something like cd4 and they play knight d4, and then you play like knight c6, bishop c6, and we'll go ahead and turn the engine on here just so you can see. After rook fd1, black is clearly worse because black has to move his queen to one of these kind of inferior squares. Like, black is going to have to move his queen to either c8 or e8, both of which are very uncomfortable squares. Like, if we have to move to c8, we're going to have the other rook move to c1, and that's going to be uncomfortable. And if we move to e8, it's kind of cramping, and that's going to be uncomfortable as well. The only square in the QGD where the queen doesn't seem to get in the way of anything else is the e7 square. So as a rule, we try to get it there. So like right here, if you look at the engine assessment, it says knight e4. Now, interestingly enough, we also have this Mikhail Tal game, Nikolic versus Predrak, and Mikhail Tal, playing the black pieces, played knight e4. You can actually see we're following this Mikhail Tal game. So you can learn a lot by watching some of these players that played chess back in the 1950s and 60s, and actually in this case he played this game back in 1982. But you can learn a lot by looking at these older players that really understood kind of where to put their pieces and what the general rules are of various different positions. And we can learn a lot about how to play chess. Now, what's interesting is, yeah, it's really great. If they play bishop e7, we can take back, we can play queen takes e7, and our queen has obtained happiness on the e7 square. And as you can see, we're very close to equality. The other way that this can happen is they could play bishop g3 and just keep it on the board. So now what should we do here? Well, remember the rule. The rule is get the queen to e7. So we should play knight g3, h g3, bishop f6, and then get our queen to e7. So rook f d1, queen e7, life is happy again, and everything is good. So like in a QGD, the rule is get the queen to e7. And in a lot of your open Sicilians, like if you castle queenside, the rule is get your king to b1. If you castle kingside and play f4, the rule is get your king to h1. So we can look at these rules for different positions and different middle games, and we can start establishing just general rules of where to put our pieces, based on the opening that we're playing. And whenever you're studying your openings and whenever you're going over your Grandmaster games to try to establish your theory and try to establish how to play your middle games, you should constantly be asking these questions. Which rook, what are my king safety moves, where do my pieces belong? And you should be trying to establish general rules for whatever opening that you're playing, to try to figure out where to put your pieces when you get to a middle game. And this will especially help if you get to a middle game that you're somewhat unfamiliar with, so that you have some idea, at least, of where your pieces are supposed to go, and you're not just trying to figure it out from scratch every single time. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can incorporate some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.